Welcome to Let the Quran Speak. I'm Aisha, your host. What are Dr. Shabir's thoughts on the book Islam and Biological Evolution, Exploring Classical Sources and Methodologies? Let's see how he rates this book. Welcome to the show, Dr. Shabir.
Pleasure to be on.
So we're doing a book review. It's been a while. So why did you pick the book that you picked?
Okay.
That I know.
Well, you're already pointing to the book, so I may as well bring it up. Islam and Biological Evolution by David Solomon Jalajal. Why did I pick this? Well, in doing research regarding the question of Islam and biological evolution, naturally this book comes up. The title itself, gives it away. But I've also seen that many who have reviewed the book previous to me have found that and stated that this book is unique among books written by persons defending a religious point of view in that it gives an accurate description of the scientific approach to the theory of evolution. It captures the science in a way that other books written by perhaps lay persons in the field of science defending a religious point of view might not have had.
So what do you know about, I guess, the credentials of the author and sort of the approach that this person takes?
Well, he's obviously schooled in a traditional sort of Islamic approach to practicing Islam, like, for example, in a Darul Uloom, a religious university setting. And he himself, prior to his current occupation, he was a lecturer in Islamic theology and legal theory at the Darul Uloom in Cape Town, South Africa.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so and of course, reading his book, one sees that he has that sort of acumen. He's able to deal with classical Islamic sources. He dives into books of tafsir and hadith and commentaries on hadith and so on to give what would have been a classical and traditional Islamic view regarding many of the issues that are connected with the broader question of biological evolution.
So you mentioned earlier that the author is known to provide an accurate picture or an accurate representation. What is it about, I guess, this book? And because we did the series on biological evolution, you're very well versed in that. What is it that stands out with this book in terms of his arguments?
What is unique here is that the author goes point by point to try to not only describe what the traditional views were, but also to see what adjustments can be made to the traditional views. So whereas, for example, one of the impediments to accepting the theory of evolution is the idea that there was a global flood occurring in the time of Noah, and only the persons on the ark would have thus been the progenitors of all human beings today. He discounts that view because he shows that it's not necessary from a Muslim point of view to think that the flood of Noah was a universal flood. It must have been a flood that only affected the people of Noah. So the bottleneck that would have been created in human genetics as a result of that event, if it were a local flood, is not necessary anymore because it's possible it could have been people in other parts of the world. In some cases, he disappoints me on that score because, for example, where he looks at the description of the height of Adam in Hadith, where Adam is said to have been at the height of 60 cubits, which would mean if a cubit is 18 inches, 60 cubits would have been 90 feet. So 90 feet tall person. He tries to defend that view in the final analysis, though he has noted that Ibn Hajar, the commentator on Sahih al-Bukhari, expressed some reservation about that. But Ibn Hajar and the author of this book as well would go the route of saying, okay, we have some puzzle about that, but we won't discount it altogether. But my only concern about that is if you have your mind filled with so many things that you cannot discount, then it means that you're entertaining possibilities which, from a modern scientific point of view, are not real possibilities, but you're thinking them to be possibilities. So it's still a problem. But in any case, when it comes to the question of human evolution, this is where he draws the line in accepting evolution. So he would accept evolution for animals and plants. So generally, the theory of evolution, describing animals, describing plants, and so on, he is on board with that. But when it comes to human evolution, he wants to have Adam as the beginning of a separate strand or a separate branch, not linked to the previous branches of evolutionary history. And this, of course, is where he differs from the known science. And in order to do that, he is even willing to accommodate the idea that there were Homo sapiens in the time of Adam. He constructs 3 diagrams to show the scenarios which are possible in Islamic thinking. Okay, in one scenario, you have Homo erectus as being almost the top of the line in human type evolution of humanoids or pre-humans. And then you have Adam there in the middle, not connected to anything before him. And from Adam we have Homo sapiens and also Homo neanderthalis. So Neanderthals are a separate branch along with Homo sapiens from the previous evolutionary history. Okay, that's scenario 1. To him, this is acceptable for Muslims to think it this way. Second scenario, you have the previous evolutionary history, including Homo neanderthalis. So Neanderthals are very similar to modern human beings, but they were a separate evolutionary history, and Homo sapiens all come from Adam, and Adam is there, not joined to the previous stems of the tree of life, but starting with a circle, and then from there we get Adam, and Homo sapiens more generally. Third scenario. Third scenario is the most interesting in that in this third scenario you have all of the previous humanoids. You have Homo erectus, you have Homo neanderthalis, you have Homo sapiens as well. But side by side with that, you have Adam and his progeny as a separate branch that is not, calling it a separate branch is not correct, as a separate line of development, not connected to the previous lines, not branching off from the previous. So in other words, there is an evolutionary history already. There are already Homo sapiens on the ground, according to this scenario. And Adam and his progeny are similar to other Homo sapiens in terms of physiognomy, but Adam would be different in terms of something like a spirit or a ruh. Here the author is a little bit vague as to how different Adam would be, but he maintains that what is considered human, the definition of human, would be defined according to what Adam is, not according to what the other lines are.
Because that's sort of the separate and
to him it is essential to maintain that Adam was a separate line of development, not linked to the previous
And to
history.
come to these options and sort of rationalize them and theorize them, what sources does he use? He uses hadith and those kinds of things?
He uses hadiths, commentaries on hadith. He uses Quran and commentaries on the Quran, classical commentaries, up to the grand scholar Al-Alusi. And of course many previous scholars and their exegesis of the Quran.
So just switching now to the actual organization of the book, how is it? Is it an easy read? Is it organized easily?
Yes, in fact it is, to begin with, it's an easy read. The author uses a very plain and simple language, of course with the caveat here that he had to explain highly scientific concepts, so where it was needed he is technical, but most of the time he is very plain and simple in the language used. In terms of organization, yes, the book is very well organized as well. First it deals with Muslim commentaries, Muslim ideas, and then it deals with the scientific description of evolution, and then it tries to bring them all together in dealing with the question of human evolution in particular.
I know you mentioned earlier there was one argument where it didn't quite line up, but are there other areas of the book where you think it was lacking and it needed to go further?
Well, I think maybe at the time that this book was written, which in fact is not very long ago, but given that the modern genetics is in fact quite modern, one can understand why he does not seem updated with that. So the book was copyrighted 2009. Okay. In the meantime, there have been a slew of publications in the field dealing with the modern genome project. We know that now the modern genes are mapped, and this provides a new argument in favor of Darwinian type evolution, in that whereas previously largely the evolutionary history was described based on the phenotype, the physical body, now it can be described in terms of genetics. We can see genetically that this person is descended from that person. We can, you know, for $99 you can go to a website and submit your gene sample and your DNA sample, and you know, your results will come back telling you that, you know, your grandparents, great-great-grandparents, your generations emerged in India in a certain area, and so on. So the genome project now has been largely completed, and we can see that modern human beings have had a long line of historical development. To place Adam outside of that branch of development as a separate line, out of that tree of life, this does not hold given this modern scientific development and the tracing of the human genome. So we have to come to grips with this and have a conception that allows for this broader scientific acceptance. What constrains the author is his reliance on the commentaries and on the hadith. If he were to take a layered approach and ask how much of the Quran requires the view that Adam is a separate line of development, one would find that there's very little proof of that in the Quran. But of course, as I said, he's constrained by the commentary. So whereas the Quran says, for example, speaks of Adam as that which God has created with his own two hands, he wants to take this in a very literal sense, but at the same time he wants to exclude another reference where the Quran speaks about many things that God has created with his hands, including cattle. But he wouldn't extend to cattle the same kind of prerogative that he would assign to Adam. To him, the fact that Adam is said to be created with God's own two hands means that Adam is very, very special. But of course, very special, even if that were the case, does not show us special in what particular way. And that by itself does not necessarily indicate that Adam could not have had parents. So there is much more to be discussed, but I take this book as a stepping stone for many. It will provide for many an eye-opening view of the theory of evolution, and present for many Muslims the possibility of thinking of the development of Homo sapiens, especially in that third scenario that we described, that were not necessarily the progeny of Adam. So that Adam's progeny of Homo sapiens would have lived side by side with other Homo sapiens. And of course, if one could not tell the difference, then there would have been connections and marriage between the progeny of Adam and other Homo sapiens. So these are all possibilities for Muslims to contemplate. And the book by Jalajil makes this contemplation even possible for some Muslims.
I'm sure you've sparked the interest of a lot of our viewers. Thank you very much, Dr. Shabir.
You're quite welcome.
Hey YouTube, we hope you benefited from this video. If you liked it, or if you didn't, let us know in the comments below. And if you're interested in learning more, check out some of our other videos. And don't forget to subscribe so you can get new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.